Hi, Sir Karl from Fact Fiend here, answering a question I've been asked probably easily 100 or more times in the 5 or so years I've been making Fact Fiend videos, and that is, where do I get all of my ideas from?
Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow.
That is a question that's incredibly awkward for me to answer. One, because there isn't really an answer to that question that would satisfy the kind of people I think are asking it. Because one of the things that I've dealt with over the years is a lot of people asking how to get into making YouTube videos, where do we get ideas from, and when I try to explain like the many steps and the extreme amount of work that goes into creating something like Fact Fiend or a YouTube channel or researching articles and videos for the internet, they always ask it in that way, where they don't want to know about the work that went in, they just want the easy answer that lets them do it without any of that work. So, which is something I always found frustrating, because there's so much work that goes into research, and it's not something that I even consider to be work anymore, because it's something I've done literally for as long as I'm able to remember. As a kid, I would voraciously consume every kind of fact book or research textbook that I was able to get my hands on. For example, I had those binders, if people remember those huge binders that you'd get like week by week, and they tell you stuff like about bugs or dinosaurs.
To meet and learn surprising facts about the magnificent animals that live there, all through the captivating, colorful pages of Zoo Books, the publication especially created for young readers. Each monthly issue of Zoo Books is packed with breathtaking full-color photos and scientifically accurate illustrations.
And then as I got older, I would read my mum and my dad's research textbooks. They're both into... not into, it was the job. My dad is a social care worker, so he had a lot of books on like child psychology and just things of that nature, and my mum was into, she does for a living. At the time, she was a carer for the elderly and also went into social work, so she shared some of the books with my dad. But like, the books that they had on their shelves were interesting, would have some stuff that I found fascinating in there, and would share some of the more macabre details with my classmates, which often resulted in me being singled out as that weird kid who seemed to know a lot about very specific subjects no one gave a shit about.
Like Winston here.
And then as I became, a person in my own right, because kids aren't really people until they develop a personality of their own, and I just decided that video games are my thing. I would deep delve into all those. I would buy magazines with my pocket money for everything about video games that I could find, and just again voraciously consume all of the information that I could to share the facts learned within with my friends and anyone who would listen. Something I thankfully been able to turn into a job these last few years. And that is really the one piece of advice I can give people who are curious about where do I get my ideas from. Just read as much as you can. And if it's something you are interested in, or if you're just genuinely interested in learning things as a whole, it's not really work. And that's the old cliche, isn't it? Like, do something you enjoy, you'll never work a day in your life. Like, it is true for me. I genuinely enjoy researching ideas and sharing the things that I learn with people. Hence the existence of Fact Fiend, because my friends were sick of me talking to them about all these things I learned, and I thought, well, I might as well try and monetize this sort of thing. But I thought what I'd do is I'd go through my bookshelf and grab just a smattering of the examples of things that I read and use to help me find ideas. And the first ones are they're just research books, like old Pelican books and things like that. You can pick these up relatively cheaply from stores that sell books, bookstores I think they're called.
What's next?
How to make £1 million.
Hey, let's have a look. Write a book called How to Make £1 Million.
Good idea.
Like Pelican books especially, you can get them really cheaply, and one of the reasons I like to get these is because a lot of them are very old, and some of the ideas presented within are things that people haven't thought about or bothered to research for literally decades, and in some cases like almost 100 years. And that for me is something I find very interesting. The idea that I'm reading something, an idea from someone who's now long dead, that may or may not be accurate anymore, or something people have thought about. And just, yeah, in that vein, I've also got a lot of books about ancient myth, like usually Greek myth, but I've got a bunch of textbooks and books on ancient myth, the Romans, the Greeks, that sort of thing.
Aren't you Diogenes, the famous philosopher and total weirdo?
Total weirdo, you say?
And one thing that I'd like to give a big shout outs to, and I would recommend, is children's textbooks. And that sounds weird, and I've had the look people are probably making at me right now is the same look I got from one Simon Whistler from Today I Found Out. And when I did a podcast with him a couple of years ago, and he asked me the same question, like, where do you get all your ideas? Where do you start your researching process? And I told him, children's textbooks. What do you mean children's textbooks? He said, well, sometimes when I'm writing or researching something, I might not have a base level of knowledge, like the base level of knowledge required to talk about this thing with the assumed authority required to write a factual article on it. And the best way to get that baseline knowledge is to just go to the source, a textbook for children or older kids or teenagers that teaches this subject, because those are designed to give you the most basic grounding to that subject possible and explains it in a way for a layperson who has no familiarity with it. And once you've got that basic grasp of it, then you can go look at the sources and information that is perhaps a bit more in depth. But it's always important to have that good foundation. So for that reason, I also have a lot of just reference books for kids, because sometimes you don't know. And it's not something you should be ashamed of to admit you don't know something. And if you don't know something, the best place to start is at the beginning. So that's something I would recommend as well. And there's no shame in learning cool, fun facts about animals. For that reason, I also love websites like Discovery Kids. I love going on and doing the quiz of what animal am I, or teaching me facts about animals that I might not be familiar with. Or, animals that I like but may not know some cool stuff about. You go, have a look, I want to know about sloths. What can, one of those websites teach you about sloths? And if something sounds interesting to me, I'll think, is there more I can learn about that? And then go seek out something more in depth, more adult, as it were. But yeah, never feel ashamed of, starting at the beginning. Everyone's got to start somewhere. But Fact Fiend doesn't just do, hard fact-based stuff. We also do a lot of entertainment-based things. For that reason, I'm also a huge collector of things like this. This right here is, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's one of those books that detailed the making of a specific movie. And in this case, it is Godzilla. And that is the 2014 Godzilla movie. Stuff like this is a gold mine for content creators like myself, and people just interested in it. It's full to the brim with background information you can't find online unless it's in an article written by someone like me who's read this book and is recounting, which is a treasure trove of behind the scenes information about it, the production of a movie, and again, I'm going to go back to what I said here about starting at the beginning with children's reference books and things like that. I don't like that movie at all, but there's still a bunch of interesting stuff in there about it. And that's something I've learned over my years of doing this, that even if you don't think you are interested in a particular subject, there's probably some aspect of it that will intrigue you. And an example from the Godzilla book an example of something I learned from that Godzilla book that was really interesting is that they tested the Godzilla roar by borrowing the sound system from the Rolling Stones. And they also have a huge pull-out in here. Let's see if we can get to it. Fuck it, these things are kind of improvised. So they've got a cool pull-out in the middle, which is full of a bit of information you would never get, knowing just how the... here it is, yes. We have this cool pull-out section here, which shows you all of the initial designs for Godzilla. And it goes through, the various different, things the art team came up with, trying to figure out a way to create a new Godzilla for the movie. And some of the information in there is really interesting. Another example that springs to mind. I've not done any research on this video about my research before. This is just stuff I remember, from years of doing this. Is that Godzilla's profile in that movie was based on that of an eagle, because they believe that an eagle had a very noble profile, and they wanted to convey that with Godzilla. And that's an interesting fact that you can pepper into another video about Godzilla, or maybe spin it off into a full article that could be turned into a video. And that's just what Fact Fiend is. It's finding one tiny piece of information that I personally think is quite interesting and spinning it out into an article to delve into it. And in that vein, speaking of entertainment stuff, I have a subscription to Empire magazine. I'm not promoting this. I get it for free through my bank. I have an account where I get a free magazine subscription. I pick Empire. Again, you'll find a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't find online in here. Exclusive interviews, behind the scenes featurettes, information on movies that are coming out, reviews, all that good stuff. It's like, and also I like collecting all the artwork. So I have like hundreds, not hundreds, but at least like a couple dozen of these. I've had like 2-3 year subscription. Like, you want to learn some stuff about some movies, they're going to tell you it all in here. And just, it's never going to be a bad thing to know more about, something that I really enjoy, which is movies and entertainment. And then the other kind of entertainment, like video games. So we also have more of these reference books that I've got. This one's on Final Fantasy. I've got a couple of these dotted about the house. I think people go on coffee table books. I will, on occasion, just go through these, flick through them if I'm bored, having a cup of tea, doing some research. Yeah, not doing research, no. I'll do research while I'm waiting for editing to go through. I don't do research while I'm doing research, but I never am not looking at things. So during my recent hiatus, it was really difficult for me to not open up these books. Because I don't often read for pleasure anymore, because I read so much for my job. I read thousands and thousands of words a day. I'm always scrolling an article on my phone, like a thread on Reddit, one of these books open or something like that. But again, this is just a bunch of, you're not going to get this online, unless you go to those websites where people just scan these things straight down. But I'm a huge fan of the Final Fantasy series. I want you to know more about it. Got some decent stuff, but I don't reckon this thing's a threat. At this point. Oh no, Lucas! No, it's using Corona. Oh fuck!
Cade, save us!
Bunch of tidbits in here about the design of characters, how the worlds came about, how the monsters were designed, and just a cool thing to have on your shelf. And then this is something that's so well known about me now that I've even started getting gifts of this nature. So I've got to show this one off because they'll get mad if I don't. And just this is another one of the huge big reference books I've got. This is called Metamorphosis. And it's about the career of Rick Baker, a very prolific, very well-regarded special effects artist in the movie industry. This was a two-parter. It was bought for me by my girlfriend's mother, who knows I love doing research. It is fantastic. Again, a shit ton of just information in there about, I want to say hundreds of movies. The guy works on all sorts. It is phenomenal, huge, big spreads of all the special effects work that is done, behind the scenes details that you'd never get anywhere else, anecdotes, stories about movies that I might not be a fan of but may seek out as a result of going through this book. And that's the one piece of advice that I'd like to give for the people who maybe want to know, where do I get my ideas? Because I've not really said anything. I've said a lot, but I've not said anything. And from the way that I'm talking right now, I'm hoping people can tell this is something I'm incredibly passionate about and I'm not putting on. I legitimately love researching and learning new things. And when I get asked, where'd you get your ideas from? I can't give an answer because it's from everywhere. Anything can give you an idea. It's about getting into the mindset to find them. So for example, we've gone through all these books here. Talk about the Godzilla one. That one little detail in there about Godzilla's roar. And that they tested it by getting the Rolling Stones recording equipment and sound system and put the Godzilla roar through it. That put me on a journey of what is the Godzilla roar? So I researched that, in this book, and I found out there's only one copy of the original Godzilla roar. And it belongs to Toho, and they are very protective of it because that's Godzilla. That's the voice of their most famous creation. And I wrote an article about that, which peppered in all those facts I've just mentioned. And just that's the mindset you have to be in. It's no fact or tidbit or bit of information is inconsequential as long as you are passionate about it. So as I say, if you're watching this, you're probably a fan of the channel, you'll know that I fucking love RoboCop and have talked in great length about a whole host of things about that movie because I love that movie. And if you are passionate about something, any detail, no matter how small, can be something you can spin off into an entire 10-15 minute long video. In regards to RoboCop, we've done videos about one single scenes, the one where RoboCop throws Clarence Boddicker through a window, for example.
Fuck you!
Individual props, RoboCop's gun, the Auto 9, where we talked about how it's 3 guns in one and was technically illegal in the United States. or even just like, ideas, such as like the movement of RoboCop, and like, an interview that was based on an interview with Peter Weller. I saw where he talked about being coached by a mime artist to learn how to be RoboCop. That then went wrong when they got the costume, and again, that was a whole research rabbit hole, and I fell down. It's like, oh, Peter Weller learned how to do mime work. Why doesn't RoboCop move like a mime? Oh, it was the costume didn't really fit him properly because the special effects artist in charge of it, Rob Bottin, wanted it to be like, form-fitting, which didn't allow Peter Weller to move properly. Rob Bottin, I've heard that name before. What else has he done? Oh, he worked on The Thing. Wow, that's really interesting. Those are like two of my favourite movies. What else has Rob Bottin done? Oh, Rob Bottin kind of disappeared off the face of the earth after doing those few movies, and has sporadically appeared to do interviews but has never really talked about anything. That's interesting. This super influential guy who's been in some of my favourite, or been involved with some of my favourite productions, disappeared off the face of the planet. I wonder if there's anything else I can find out about this guy. Oh, he's like 6'8". That's kind of noteworthy because tall people tend to stand out. What else has he done besides these? Oh, he was the tall Cantina band member in Star Wars: A New Hope. Because that's one of the movies that he worked on and cut his teeth doing, designing all the monster masks in that movie. And it's like, oh, and then you can see there, like that thought process from that. There's like 5-6 different individual articles that could have been written from that one fact leading me down a rabbit hole to just research something. And to close off, that's going to leave me to like Wikipedia. Like, people shit on Wikipedia. Wikipedia gets memed on. If you've been to higher education, you've no doubt heard teachers, lecturers tell you don't use Wikipedia as a primary source. And I think the operative word in that sentence is primary source. Wikipedia is an excellent resource in the same way that reference books and children's books are a good resource to give you a solid grounding on a subject you may not be familiar with, because it's written it's written as if it's going to be read by a layperson who may not understand the particular pieces of information being given, and therefore is very useful for people who may not be familiar with something. And it's also a great jumping off point thanks to those little blue links, or those little blue words, the hyperlinks, and all the sources at the bottom. So if anyone's ever told you don't use Wikipedia as a primary source, don't, but definitely use it as your first source to give yourself just a solid grounding on the subject, and then find something in it that's interesting and follow it. You see a piece of information, a Wikipedia article that catches your eye, go search for it elsewhere online, see what more you can find out about it. There's bound to be an interview somewhere out there where that piece of information is talked about, and it might give you more information about the subject, which can, snowball like it's done for me many, many times, and maybe, like myself, you can turn it into a career, or at the very least, the basis of your entire personality. Cheers! So I apologise if this was really rambly, and this is a question I've been asked a lot, and I've never felt comfortable answering. I have tried to answer it many times in the shower, that thing where you try and answer questions for interviews or arguments in the shower, and this is the best I could do. It's a very rambly video, I understand, but this is something I'm very passionate about and wanted to get all of my words out as quickly as possible and succinctly as I could. So I apologise if this video has either ran too long or not long enough based on how interested people are in it, but it's something I'm passionate about, and I would like to just apologise if it wasn't the answer people were expecting, but it's the best one I'm able to give.